Layovers, your weekly dose of aviation innovation.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome aboard from the flight deck. This is Paul Posterity, and this is Alex Hunter. We'll be the pilots for this podcast about the news, the startups, and the technologies defining the modern air travel experience. Our flight time today, 1 hour and 25 minutes, and we expect an on-time arrival. Coming up on this flight, the U.S. Airlines present their Fair Skies report, how SkyTeam Airlines use messaging apps for customer support, a new plane tracking system by Rockwell Collins, a Qantas 747 lands on a very short runway for posterity, the Apple Watch and its promise for frequent travelers, and a look at private 747s in the skies today. As we reach our cruising altitude, I'm going to turn off the fasten seatbelt sign for you. Now, ladies and gentlemen, sit back, relax, and let's turn on those noise-canceling headphones.
This is Layovers Flight 007 to Miami. Hi, Alex.
Hey, good morning.
007!
007. All of the other episodes have just been waiting for this episode.
Yeah, exactly. It was,
007.
I mean, we got one shot at this, but yeah. So, yeah, this is the James Bond episode. It's also an episode that will be filled with a lot of interesting stories. First of all, we both wanted to, Harrison Ford. I mean, he never played James Bond, but he's a very big hero of other action movies. Had an accident last week. You saw that, right?
He did, yeah. He had an engine failure right after takeoff in Southern California and managed to quite expertly put it down on a golf course with no injuries to anybody, no damage to property. I mean, he bashed himself up pretty good. I think he broke his wrist and was quite bloodied. But this is an extremely experienced pilot doing a textbook emergency landing in a very, very difficult situation. So kudos to him.
Yeah, it was pretty impressive. And apparently he's unhurt. I mean, he's okay. So that's a very, very good side of the story because we were a little bit worried. And Alex and I are basically hoping that he will have a swift recovery.
Yes, absolutely. He's a credit to the industry. He really is.
Moving to the news of the week, the shaken and steer news of the week, because this saga is never ending. It's going to be actually, I think if we're going to have more episodes of the James Bond franchise at some point, this is still, and again, the U.S. Airlines versus the Gulf Airlines. So have you seen the report? I mean, that report that we've been talking about since the few episodes, that apparently the report that says that exemplifies all the subsidies that the Gulf Airlines are apparently getting is out. Have you seen it? Have you actually read the 70 pages?
I have certainly not read the 70 pages, but I have read a lot of the editorial around it, and the gloves are off. They better be very confident about the data that they've provided. When I say they, I mean the American airlines that have submitted this report about the Middle Eastern 3 airlines and the subsidies that they allegedly receive that is making the whole landscape sort of anti-competitive.
So very quickly, I mean, we have a blog post on layovers.to which has the numbers. There's also the full report is embedded there in a PDF format if you want to peruse it. I've actually not read it in full either. I didn't want to go through, but there's a one-pager that this coalition, because now it's a coalition I've done. And it goes through the three different types of the three airlines and the different types of subsidies they're getting. And yes, we're reaching more than $40 billion. You can still see though that there's a slight difference between what they complain about Emirates on one side and Etihad and Qatar on the other. You can still feel a slight difference there, right?
Yeah, the tone is very different in each of these, which I think is interesting and telling, and I think perhaps indicates the level of relationship that they have with each other already before this all kicked off.
There's an interesting quote there. He says, these carriers are expected to grow capacity at more than 3 times the growth rate in global GDP between 2012 and 2020. So obviously this is what you and me have been saying. I mean, there's a little bit of fear there. They're eating their cake.
Absolutely. There is fear. And I think that statistic would have been used to, if it had been them, to say, look how fast we're growing. We're growing faster than GDP. This is wonderful. The industry, blah, 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 blah. But
Yeah,
holy,
so that's the Fair Skies Coalition, which also counts as members
Fair
the
Skies
yeah, that's good
give
branding,
me
right?
a break.
It counts as members some unions, so the Airline Pilots Association, etc., etc. So they launch a marketing campaign. There's another group that's called Americans for Fair Skies. I mean, you know how that's lobbying. Basically, all these groups suddenly pop up at the right time. It's a very well orchestrated campaign. So you can actually follow if you hashtag Fair Skies on Twitter and Facebook, etc. You can see a lot of these sudden updates being deployed in the past few days. So they're really they're putting out the gloves. The Economist had written an interesting article because they are supporting a little bit that view that there's clearly a market distortion in the Middle East. I'm not sure I completely agree, but one quote that I actually that I found funny was the president of U.S. Airways, Scott Kirby, said, "We just want to compete on a level playing field. That's the American way."
What a strange thing to say. That's such a strange thing to say. This is not an American industry, and viewing it as such would bring the whole industry down, in terms of quality. I think they have massively underestimated the backlash that this is going to get. And I think we've started to see some ripples of that in the responses from some of the other American airlines who have basically said, what the heck are you guys doing? Do you have any idea the size of the fight that you're picking? This can only go badly, and you're going to drag us down with you. Shut up.
Yeah, actually, you're right. So the three airlines from the Gulf haven't officially made any stance yet. Tim Clark, the CEO of Emirates, has basically promised that he will also hire a team of forensics, of analysts, etc., to actually do a similar research on the American airlines and what kind of subsidies they are getting. So basically, this is where we're going to start seeing like a lot of stuff happening. And let's be honest, the numbers. So from the early days, basically of flying until probably the 70s or the 80s, the U.S. government provided more than maybe 150 billion in subsidies,
which
in
is
state aid for the airline industry, which is normal. I mean, every single airline, especially flag carriers, were started by governments. So it's just that the timing was much before compared to the ones in the Gulf. So and there's a lot to dig there, honestly.
Yes, exactly. And they're going to go into this and they're going to buy the most expensive lawyers they can, and they're going to find all the things they need to pull this. And I'm not entirely sure what the U.S. carriers are expecting to get out of this. Are they going to say, "Oh, give the money back," or what? I just, and if they just taken all the money that they're going to spend on lobbying and everything like that and invested it in the product and the service, they might actually be able to compete with the Middle Eastern carriers. It's just so misguided. I really don't understand what they think the end game is going to be.
Well, the end game is probably lobbying to the government because that's the thing.
What's the government going to do, though? I mean,
the Canadians are doing that. The Canadians are basically blocking the expansions by not giving slots to the Gulf Airlines. I mean, maybe the Americans could do that. What I'm trying to say here, I'm not taking sides in the way of saying, okay, what the Americans should do, what the Gulf should do, is that the debate is a bit skewed because this is what I meant by reading that quote from Kirby, the American way, is that, yeah, of course, everybody wants competition on a level that is fair. And we all do agree with that. We both want a great product in terms of flying, and we agree that we want to have some fair competition. The problem is when you start comparing countries and starting what is fair, you have like the labor rules in the US are totally different from the ones in Europe, which are totally different from the ones in Singapore, which are totally different from the ones in the Gulf, which are totally different from the one in Africa. I mean, you can go on and on and on and on.
Yeah.
At what time do you stop saying what is fair? And sorry, because I'm going to rant a little bit. It's not as if the American airlines have never had any types of, and I'm not going to use the term collusion because that's the one they're using against the Gulf Airlines, but with the government. I mean, if you look at just, the rebates they're getting on jet fuel across almost a majority of the U.S. states, it amounts to more than $1 billion. I know the very touchy subject here is 9/11. So 9/11, obviously, I was very myself affected by it. And it's true that the bailout that came after it, because let's call it what it is, a bailout, was probably fair, again, that term fair, what does he mean? But probably fair to actually not let all the airlines die just after 9/11. But let's be honest, the airlines were already in a very bad shape before the attacks. They were already losing money. There are quotes, and I'm not going to go through now because I don't want to spend the entire show on it, but there are quotes that clearly display that they were having a lot of distress before the attacks. So having these kind of subsidies, where that was a form of subsidy, and then when the airlines came back to profitability around 2006-7, a lot of the programs that were put in place to help the airlines after 9/11 are still in place to that day. I mean, you can see they offloaded most of the pension plans to the federal state in the U.S. So they're not basically, and we're talking about a huge amount of money. I think it was Delta or United, I don't remember, but I'll find the notes for you. But when Delta or United did their second bankruptcy, was 2012, was it? They offloaded for an amount to $8 billion of pensions. We're talking, so we see 40 billion on one side, but here we're also talking that certainly they were externalizing part of the losses to the federal state. So do not let, I want this debate to be fair, again, that term, in a way that, in every country, the US included, there are ways where the government works with national airlines. It has always been the case.
Yeah.
Let's not believe that suddenly, the competition on one side is a pure private thing and the other side is a public thing. It's not true. It's just not true.
And I think I agree with absolutely everything you said. And there's a telling silence from a certain region that makes this whole argument seem very strange. And I would argue that those most affected by the rise of the Gulf carriers are those carriers in the past who relied on a hub model. Singapore Airlines, Thai, Cathay, especially Singapore Airlines, who relied on people transiting in from Singapore into Singapore and then off somewhere else. That was a big part of their entire business model. And that has been chipped away. We talked about it in an earlier episode. Measurably chipped away over the last decade. And yet, they have not said a thing about this issue yet, and they have way more to lose than a U.S. carrier. And this is my opinion, what I'm about to say, but this is so typical of incumbent U.S. carriers trying to fight competition in the courts so they don't have to fight them on the playing fields. And I think now that I've kind of said that, the thing that I think they're probably trying to get out of this is when the Middle Eastern three say, okay, now we're going to fly London, New York, London, San Francisco, they can put a bunch of blocks in place to make sure that that doesn't happen, and as opposed to just competing.
Yeah, that's probably you're absolutely right. I think, but just the example of the bankruptcy in 2012 was obviously American Airlines. But what you're totally right is we're not hearing that much from the European carriers either.
Lufthansa have said a little bit because I think one of the Middle Eastern carriers has gone after them specifically because they'd made comments about how unfair it is and all of that. But you're right. For the most part, they haven't said much.
In 2004, that's an interesting tidbit of history. The chairman of BA, we're talking 10 years ago, but still, said, called the U.S. carriers the walking dead, which had been, and I'm quoting, which had been forced to seek protections from the creditors are being propped by the palliative care of Chapter 11.
Oh, goodness me.
The chief executives of BA the same year also complained about the U.S. carriers having using Chapter 11 as form of state aid. What I mean by that is that, again, what is fair? At the moment, it's true that some of the airlines in Europe, so Lufthansa, Air France, KLM Group, and BA, we haven't heard them a lot about it, are also doing action against the Gulf Airlines. They raise the issue to the European Commission. But it's still interesting how silent they are in actually, siding with U.S. airlines. They will maybe side on a debate, but they will not side with U.S. airlines. We're still talking competition here.
Yeah.
Which, by the way, same thing happened in Europe. I could list all the airlines got out state aid here. I mean, Lufthansa is one with a pension plan, but there was Lot, Polish, Croatian Airlines, Serbia Jet, Montenegro Airlines, Air Malta, Latvia, SAS, Malev before he died, Cyprus Airways before he died.
Wow.
There's a huge list also because the European Commission says there's a competition commission by the EU. It says that emergency support is acceptable. And what is it? Of course, then the definition of emergency support is a bit variable. So that the same kind of thing exists, and of course, it's opening the Pandora's box here because every country will start to say, okay, what you did there is unfair. What you did there is unfair, and we're gonna have this huge battle. So coming back to what you said, Alex, at the very beginning of that segment, and I'm sorry it's taking so long. It's true that this fight it's just only starting, and the more aggressive they are in the US, the more it will open big kinds of worms.
Yeah, I think that they are ultimately going to regret this. They'll lose. I think they're trying it with Norwegian. I think Norwegian are going to find a way around to this obstructionism. This is going to go on until we're at episode 107, and I don't think we'll have finished it up by then. But boy, I think they've made a costly mistake by trying to do this.
But it will be, to finish, it will be very interesting to see what Tim Clark comes up Emirates, because he will do that task force just for the fun of it, because we always say Emirates is always a cool head in that debate, whereas Etihad and Qatar are not always. So Al Baker from Qatar Airways just, he didn't comment on the report itself, but you know that they're deploying their second A350. And they again putting that A350 to Frankfurt.
Yeah.
And you know what he said in Berlin? There was this big travel show. It said the new jet will be deployed on this route to rub salt in the wound of Lufthansa.
Jeez.
Etihad is actually launching the A380 with that residence, that fantastic room, to New York on December 1st. So also not going really against.
Going right into the backyard of some of these carriers, yeah.
And last comment, Lufthansa, and that's actually very smart. Lufthansa will start with Eurowings, their local subsidiary. They will start serving Dubai. And you know what's the starting price? 99.99 euros.
Wow.
That's a good answer, right? That's competition.
That is, yeah.
Anyway, moving on. Moving on. We're still on Emirates. Have you heard that they still want the A380s Neos?
Yeah, they can't seem to make up their mind about this, can they?
Actually, it's funny. I went a little bit back into history. Last September, the Emirates said we want 70 Airbus A380 Neos. Then in January at the World Economic Forum, the number increased to 100, and now last week it's 200. I mean, they're really putting a lot of pressure on Airbus. That's
and if you go to Airbus and say, we want this airplane, we want 200 of these airplanes, you basically get to co-create that airplane. So they can say, we need this maximum takeoff weight, we need these improvements over the current model, we need this, and this. Why? Because we're going to buy 200 of them.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, interesting enough. Here, the chief executive of Airbus actually said, I think it was also last week, that the A380 program is breaking even this year.
Oh, that's interesting.
Oh,
who said that?
Real
Airbus?
Break even. Yeah, Tom Enders, so the chief exec from Airbus.
Well, good for them. That's good.
Yeah.
That's very good.
Yeah, it's good for them. Yeah.
So we may see another breath of life into the A380 program.
Yeah, probably so.
Good.
James Bond still, in Tomorrow Never Dies, there's this, the plot is about that warship that is being untraceable in the Chinese waters, and we come back to that untraceable plane that nobody can find.
Yeah, so we've come up on a year since we lost Malaysian Airlines Flight 370, MH370, and as a result of that, as we talked about last week, there has been sort of more speculation and more analysis as we've reached this milestone in the search. coinciding with that, a report by the Malaysian government, which was 700 something pages long, that basically didn't really say.
Did you read it?
Anything. Yeah, good bedtime reading. It didn't really say anything new. It didn't say anything new, and I think that upset a lot of the families, that there had been no real progress. One of the little nuggets that came out of it that the press picked up on was the battery for one of the underwater locator beacon had expired more than a year before the crash. And of course, the press went crazy over this. It actually didn't mean a whole lot. It just meant that the battery for the locator beacon on the flight data recorder had not been replaced, perhaps when it should have, although there were many, many other functional and unexpired locator beacons on the airplane, and no one is entirely sure if this contributed in any way to the plane not being able to be found. So, it's a tragedy. It's incredible that we have not found a single shred of anything that gives us an idea of where this airplane is. But the search continues. I don't think that this battery thing is any more than a piece of writing in a logbook that somebody overlooked. I don't think there's anything there that's worth following. But one day, I hope we find this airplane.
Yeah, I totally agree. Like as we said last week, the one thing though that actually struck me, I didn't read the report either, but I went also reading about all the media coverage about it. And one thing that actually for me is important is that you remember when the plane first disappeared, there was a lot of misguided communication by the Malaysian government.
Yes.
And this is, I think, what actually appears in that report. And certainly in that report, stuff that had been said before, like, the military radar never picked it up. And then they said, actually, the military radar picked it up. And they said, the military radar didn't see a plane turning back. The military radar saw the plane turning back, etc., etc. In that report, you can see that they knew a lot of the stuff that they suddenly said they knew 3 weeks later. They knew it from the get-go. And this is, I don't know if it's going to change anything, but at least we realized that there was really sadly so, a little bit of a misguided communication. And I'm not going to use, because a lot of conspiracy theorists talk about cover-up. It's not a cover-up. It's just that they didn't know how to handle the situation, and there was a lot of back and forth. And you can see that some of the search could have been started much earlier if the information had been released at the proper time.
Yeah. I still don't think it would have affected the search, but it sure would have made things, a little bit easier had they been forthcoming with a lot of that information.
Yeah, so again, that's a James Bond plot, right? Is hijacked submarines like in The Spy Who Loved Me, or, the hijacking missiles in For Your Eyes Only. This is the conspiracy theories we're going to get as long as we don't find that plane, so I really hope we can find it. Moving on to... Sadly, a series of accidents that you've witnessed, Alec. I mean, you witnessed them personally, obviously.
Yeah, that would be weird. I'd start to question my place in this universe if I'd seen all three of these. But there have been just basically in March, there have been a series of these weird, quite spectacular, but non-fatal accidents in the airline world. We've had 3. There was the SpiceJet -8. In Hubli, which went off the runway. No one was injured. And then in New York, a Delta LaGuardia and MD-88 went off the runway in this terrible weather that the East Coast has been having. A few minor injuries, no deaths, mercifully. And it kind of went up against the seawall. So if that had a little bit more juice on that plane, then gosh, I think this would have been a lot worse. Scary, yeah. But everyone was okay, thank goodness there. And then finally, in Kathmandu, in Nepal, a Turkish A330 skidded off the runway and the nose gear collapsed. And that closed Kathmandu Airport for 3 days before because they weren't exactly equipped to get an A330 off of the runway. So it just sat there. Again, nobody badly hurt, which is miraculous in and of itself, but really strange. I don't think this is a reflection of overall aviation safety. I just think it's a strange series of events that we shouldn't read too much into.
Yeah, it's bad luck. I think 2014 was actually the safest year on the record for the airline industry, civil aviation, even though we know the two big stories about the two, sadly, Malaysian airlines had been grabbing the headlines. It was very safe, actually.
Yeah, you're right. You're right. And I think IATA just came out with a report on safety yesterday and called it a year of contrasts, which is probably about right in terms of airline safety.
I would say there was one article that drew my attention. It's on the Runway Girl Network. It's a pretty cool website that I'm reading about aviation and the passenger experience. And one thing they said, linking not all the three, but some of these accidents with Arizona 214, was it? The one that crashed in San Francisco, you remember?
Yes.
They said that every of these occurrences, because now, people are escaping the plane, most of them unhurt, but they're taking pictures and et cetera, et cetera. And you see one thing, and that's what the article said. The worrisome trend is that people are taking their luggages with them.
I know. Yeah, Asiana was a bad one for that. There were pictures of people with their hand luggage, and it's like the biggest no-no in any accident situation. Just get off the plane, get away from that gigantic fuel tank that you're sitting on top of.
Yeah, even just turning back to take a picture is a bad idea in itself.
Yeah, absolutely crazy.
It's insane. By the way, do you have any favorite scene of James Bond taking back control of a plane?
Oh no, I don't know off the top of my head.
Actually, my favorite scene in an airplane is on the Leaving Daylights, and it's not a movie that a lot of people love. It's one of my favorites actually, and it's when Timothy Dalton, so James Bond, is fighting a baddie at the back of Hercules C-130. And he tries to then, to get rid of the baddie and take back the control back of the plane. I really love that scene. Anyway, sorry, I love my James Bond, and this is 007. I just had to. Moving on to very shortly, a brief piece of news. I think I mentioned the plane already. I think it was last week or 2 weeks ago, and I wrote an article about it. It's Solar Impulse 2. So it's this massive wing, basically filled with solar cells. That is just started its flight around the world. It's the first ever. They are attempting to do the first ever around the world trip without any fuels, only on solar cells. It's something that's pretty cool, I think, right?
Yeah, absolutely amazing. In fact, it's just coming into Karachi now after a flawless flight from Dubai to Oman yesterday.
Yeah, you can follow on solarimpulse.com, although the website was down many times. There's so many people trying connecting. So on Twitter, for Solar Impulse, at Solar Impulse is the account. And I'll put also in the show notes, there's a live feed on YouTube. You can constantly see what's happening. So maybe you want that as a background because, most of the time it's just two guys piloting a plane. But it's pretty cool. I think the challenge is really nice here. We're clearly far off from having an A380 just using solar power, but it is the way we're going with flying. We have to keep doing these innovations. And
absolutely,
I think
100% agree with you.
He makes us dream as well. So Godspeed.
It's very inspiring. Very inspiring.
It is. So Bond flew many times a 747, which is Alex and my favorite plane. The last time was in Quantum of Solace in 2008, and it was actually in Virgin Atlantic, but we'll come to that later when we're going to talk about James Bond. But he never flew Qantas.
No, he didn't. And Qantas have just retired their very first 747-400 in a really quite emotional, rather sweet way. They flew it they donated it to a museum, which is wonderful in and of itself. They should get massive kudos for that. And they flew it to this museum, and they had a huge welcome from all of these people that probably aren't hugely aviation nerds like we are. But the pictures are wonderful. The video is spectacular of this plane landing on a very short runway, and I think that they had to. It was like a 24-minute flight from Sydney Airport, and they donated it to the Historical Aircraft Restoration Society, and it will be the only, I didn't know this, the only 747-400 in the world on public display.
Oh, I didn't know that either.
Yeah,
Wow.
which is great. So for if you're ever at Illawarra, which is not too far from Sydney, it's definitely going to be worth checking out. And there was a rumor going around that it was really sad because they landed at on this short runway and they'd never be able to take off again. It would be physically impossible for this plane to ever leave again, which is quite a nice story. But it turns out even Qantas came out and said, yes, that's kind of not true. If we took all the seats out of the airplane, we could get this bird in the air.
I'm sure. I read there was.
They'd find a way.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, come on. It's true that the runway was only, I think, 1,800 meters long or short, because it's really a short runway. And I think what they did, they landed. I mean, there's a few videos. There's even a view from the cockpit for the landing. It's really cool.
Amazing.
I think they landed at an approach speed that was much slower than usual approach speed for a 747, and they also pumped down the tires.
Yes.
In order, right? Yeah.
I mean, it must have been a fun project for everybody involved in this to try and figure out the logistics of getting a plane this size. And there's a wonderful picture that we'll post in the show notes of this incongruously large 747-400, right up against like 35-year-old Cessnas and Pipers and things like that. It's really a wonderful picture in this tiny little regional airport there. That's now its home.
Yeah, I'll definitely try to check it out next time in Australia, which hopefully will be soon. I don't know, guys, but I really hope so. Still 747. So another tidbit about James Bond. Actually, Bond flew once Lufthansa. And we know that Lufthansa...
Well, you really have your 007 trivia. This is very impressive.
I really love James Bond. He flew, I think it was on Diamonds Forever. He flew to Amsterdam to LAX on a Lufthansa. It was not a 747, but we know that Lufthansa is the airline that is the most committed to the 747-8, so the newest version of the 747. Air China also has it, but the good thing, and that's good news for you, Alex, Korean Air is introducing its 747-8 in London. You'll be able to fly Seoul to London and London to Seoul. I think the flights will start in August. The number will be KE 907 and 908. I'm sure. So that's one more chance for you, Alex, to fly. And it's from London. That's great news.
Finally, Paul and I have always lamented that for some reason, London doesn't seem to get the cool airplanes until ages after they launched. The Dreamliner was the exception. A lot of airlines deployed it, but they seem to have scaled back and added capacity, which is good for Heathrow, but bad for those of us that want to try all these neat new airplanes that are coming out. The 787 originally, the A350, the 748. So good. I am now going to Seoul this year because I want to fly on that airplane.
and the airport, Seoul Incheon, is a really, really, really good airport. It's one of the best in the world. One piece of tidbit, and I'm sure we're going to read it about it in the Design Air, because these guys, it's a website and they're very good at talking about seats arrangements and the new products that are being laid out. Interestingly, on Lufthansa, the 747-8 has 8 first-class seats. Korean Air will only have 6 in the similar room environment, and the business class, which is in the upper deck, Lufthansa has 32, and Korean Air will only have 22. So that means that there will be a new product in that plane. I'm very curious to see it, and probably the Design Air will find that information for us. Moving on to the innovation news of the week, it's the kind of news that we wouldn't have if James Bond wasn't here, because you remember in A View to a Kill, it's not the best Bond movie, but you remember the plot was let's destroy the Silicon Valley.
I'm gonna make a controversial statement here, but Timothy Dalton was my favorite Bond.
You know what? Me too. God damn it!
Thank you. You're the only person in the world that agrees with me. No one liked him. I liked him. I thought he was. Maybe it's because he was the Bond I grew up with. But okay, Daniel Craig's pretty kick-ass. But
I agree.
But Timothy Dalton, there was something about him that I was like, yep, I get it. You're a good Bond.
I you know what? I totally agree with you. So the first piece of innovation, before we get lost in Bond quotes and stuff and stories of our youth, SITA has just released a report, another report. We're talking reports today, right? Called "The Future is Personal." It's pretty interesting. So obviously, it comes from a company, but it goes into a lot of the trends. They do a lot of surveys in airports, airlines, etc., and looking at the trends where the investment is going through innovation. And the one bit that I really liked it first. Do you use any airline and or airport apps, Alex?
I use lots of airline apps. I don't think I've ever used an airport app.
They say something that is that has been, I mean, it's an evidence, but it's been the limiting factor for me using airline apps is that a lot of the times it's very good for booking and having, for instance, your boarding pass, right? Lufthansa, for instance, one is very good, but they're not always very good at giving you real-time information. So if there's a gate change or if there's a delay, what I want and what most people want, and this is what the report is actually stressing, is that this information should be live on your phone immediately. I mean, I default most of the time to the screens in the airport. I'm like, okay, where's the gate actually? Okay, there it is, because I still do not trust that the app will give me a real-time information. And they say this is one of the biggest hindrance of the adoption of airline apps and also to a certain extent airport apps. And I believe that's, I mean, it's an evidence, but it's something that's really need to be worked, because even someone like me, very savvy, I'm limited by it.
Yeah, I'm frustrated that I have to have so many airline apps simply to just get my boarding pass. The rest of it is all peripheral garbage as far as I'm concerned. Like, I think if you were able to look at sorry, I mean, if you were able to look at the analytics of my use of airline apps, it would be give me my boarding pass and then leave me the hell alone. I haven't, but I think that I'm not a normal user. I did a little off the cuff poll on Twitter saying, have you ever booked a flight using an airline app? And the response was overwhelmingly, yes, people do.
Wow,
but
okay,
that kind of freaks me out a little bit. I would consider myself a bit of a power user, but yeah, whatever they can do to solve this disparity and this kind of distribution of information across multiple apps, multiple platforms, and either looking down at my app or looking at an information display screen, neither of which have any relation to each other or any relevance directly to me, gosh, I mean, I hope they're able to do it. I think it's a big thing, but if anybody is in the position right to do it, it's SITA, who owns so much of the infrastructure of airports and airlines.
Yeah, you're absolutely correct. The one thing, tidbit of information is another evidence, but they say that nowadays that 97 of the passengers carry some sort of electronic device, either a smartphone, tablet, laptop, on all three at times. I guess you're an all three guy, or maybe two, because I don't think you use your tablet, right?
Not too much.
Yeah, right. Me too. I have a tablet, but I don't always take it. So meaning that what you just said about that relevant information for yourself, which is the title of this report, The Future is Personal, should be there. It's still not there. I mean, I still do not have to rely. I mean, I still sometimes I'm not sure that the information I'm getting on my phone is right, and I still want to double check on the screen. And
yeah, that's an interesting trust thing, isn't it? That's an interesting trust thing, that you assume that the airport is going to be right and the app might not be. I think we've learned from TripIt that it can be the other way around.
Correct.
But TripIt is an outlier in that because they have been around for so long and are so good.
Yeah. A few more things here is that it's interesting to see that where the airlines, they did a kind of ranking, where are the airlines performing the best and the airlines performing the worst in terms of technology. In terms of performing the lowest is the wireless IFE, though there's a lot of improvement that is expected. It's the live TV installations. It's interesting. It's a big trend. Live TV is a major trend that I've never. I think I just watched once the World Cup on Emirates, but never watched live TV. But apparently, it's something a lot of people request.
Yeah.
And the travel disruption prevention. I think this is something that airlines do not perform very well at telling you exactly what I said. What you should, what are the contingency plans you can have. Where they perform best is the mobile boarding passes, exactly what you want, like you said. In terms of airports, where they perform lowest, it's again disruption prevention.
Yep.
So you can see that the areas where most people complain, which is like my flight has been canceled, my flight is delayed, etc., are those still the ways, the areas where although some investment is being done, is not pushing enough.
No.
And that's a clear correlation. They perform obviously best airports on real-time information. Those screens you see,
they own it. They own it. They have to be good at that.
Yeah, and but it's interesting. The little thing here, that I read in a kind of related way. I don't know, another James Bond tidbit. And the world is not enough. James Bond has these eyeglasses that do X-ray stuff, and obviously this is one of the trends we see in innovation, is that most of the stuff you see in all the James Bond movies are now actually
real.
Yeah. And so SITA, again, the president of the APAC region, said something I didn't know, because we mentioned that Virgin Atlantic had been trying Google Glass, had been trying smartphones, etc., had been trying a lot of stuff at Heathrow. And he said that out of all the attempts they've made, Google Glass was the most successful. And I quote,
wow.
The universal symbol for I'm bored with you is either to look at your watch or look at your phone. And actually having a pair of glass for the staff means that he or she can still look you in the eye. And that's proven very, so it could. That's one future for Google Glass, or whoever else does that. It's pretty interesting.
Yeah.
Another thing that because sometimes United has on its app as an integration with Uber, and you wanted to mention something about Uber here.
Yeah, just quickly as we zip through this. So Uber have had some battles all over the world about the legality or the questionable legality of the service, and really it's the technical legality, I think. And they've just had another setback in Japan, where in Fukuoka, the ride-sharing component, which was called Everyone's Uber, has been deemed illegal because it was allowing drivers to profit from taking someone from point A to point B without actually having a taxi license. So they've shut it down. They still have a presence in Tokyo, but even there, and you'll know more about this than me, they're struggling a little bit because there is a huge marketplace, and there are 50,000 taxis in Japan, which is 4 times the amount of in New York. So
and you know what? And the door, the back door opens automatically.
Yeah, and it's awesome. I think so. The local taxi operators are so powerful there that they have their own apps. And Japan, I mean, this is a generalization. They usually innovate from within. That's where the success seems to come from. It's rarely imported. And I think Uber have struggled. And actually, while we were filming Attaché in Barcelona, we learned that Uber is illegal in Spain. And now they've pivoted to do this food delivery service, which didn't actually work when we tried it. So they're good at Plan B, but another setback for Uber.
Yeah, they have a lot of money in the coffee, and I remember
they don't need to worry about it too much.
I remember having dinner with Travis Kalanick, the founder of Uber. I think it was in Paris in 2011, probably. He was asking me about Asia, and I told him that Tokyo and Japan in general will be a tough nut to crack, because of what you said. There's already so many taxis, and the quality of the taxis are also very good.
Yeah,
and there's maybe less incentive for people to use limo, but they are in Tokyo. They're very limited service, actually. You can find Ubers, and you'll see when you get there, Alex, you have only a very limited areas of Tokyo, because it's this huge city, when you can actually get access to Uber. And the other thing is that, like you just mentioned in terms of the local competition, Line, which is a messaging app, has just launched Line Taxis. It's a taxi hailing service. And what they've done is they've done a partnership with Nihon, which is one of the largest taxi operator. It has 23,000 cabs, it's the nation's largest groups of taxi operations. So within that app that is already very popular in Japan for communication, you can actually directly hail a cab. And they are present in 90 cities.
Wow. Yeah. See, that's an uphill battle there, really, isn't it?
Yeah. But anyway, well, it's I wish them best. I think Uber is still an interesting model, and I just mentioned earlier that it was integrated in United's airline app, for instance, because that's part of the the user experience. You leave the airport, you arrive at the airport and immediately you can hail Uber. I mean, there's kind of the old passenger journey. That's an interesting, and I think Uber can be part of it for some airlines. It's an interesting.
They'll have to just come at it at a different angle, which is what they've been good at.
So keeping in Japan, so ANA uses Line to communicate with its passengers and customers. We saw that in episode 005. That's another James Bond. No, it's not. That China Eastern was trying. Remember doing this app with a chat bot, so you can actually request stuff. So which was a little bit out there. But the reason I mentioned China Eastern is that the SkyTeam has been doing a lot of things, and they're going very heavily into these messaging apps that we just mentioned. So Line being one, WeChat being the other. So WeChat, Air France is now on WeChat only for these Chinese customers. It's a Chinese account, and SkyTeam itself, so the group, the alliance, has just opened its own WeChat account as well, and people can ask directly from the schedules, the connections, etc. So it's an interesting way, because if you don't know WeChat or even Line, it's way more than simply WhatsApp. And I say simply WhatsApp. WhatsApp is just a one-to-one communication channel. These are closer to something like maybe Facebook. It's very hard to compare. So they offer a lot of services, and still for SkyTeam, Transavia, which is the low cost airline from the KLM Air France group, actually is trialing right now WhatsApp in Europe, since we don't have WeChat, etc. So would you ever consider talking to an airline via WhatsApp?
Absolutely, yeah. You go where the audience is, right? And I think if we all prefer, at least I prefer being able to talk to somebody live, not on the phone. If I could message them or chat to them online, great. I would love that. As long as it's actual full service. There are certain airlines out there, Virgin Atlantic, who their chat staff can't actually help you with a specific reservation. It's only general questions, which is like, why bother?
Oh yeah. Oh, okay. Yeah, I didn't think about that. I don't know for what Transavia does. I know that I think it's not 24/7. It's 8 to 10, but it's 7 days a week. So that's another step in the right direction. It's only for the Netherlands right now, but if it's successful, they're gonna expand that. But I agree with you. There's so much time, especially when you try to call nowadays customer support, and it's not only limited to airlines and airports. It can be everything. You end up in this eternal loop of press 1 to do this, press 5 to do that, press star,
and stay on hold for 45 minutes.
Yeah, and you just want a simple answer. You say, what is the, it could be about the gate change, it could be something very simple, and that could cut the time a lot if I could use an app, just a chat app, and just ask a question, and having someone, and you know what, even if it's a robot answering me, I wouldn't notice.
No,
I just want the answer to my question, and that, I think in terms of customer support, it both helps us, you and me and other flyers, but it could also help the airlines into limiting the amount of time that you get an answer. You could automate a lot of this stuff. So I think it's pretty interesting.
Absolutely.
Pretty interesting. Moving on to another. This is a bit just interesting tidbit, more than a piece of actual innovation that's going to be implemented in a plane tomorrow.
I hope.
Well, let's start with the 007 tidbits. You just asked me you challenged me on that. So, for your eyes only, which is also a favorite of mine, you can remember there's this helicopter that can be controlled with a radio, so with a remote control. And when you think about it nowadays, you have your own drone. So again, reality is calling back to James Bond. Here, though, and that's never happened in James Bond, is an entire plane that can be, it's a jet actually, that could be directed, piloted with your thoughts.
Amazing.
What do you think about it?
Amazing. I mean, it's the future, really, isn't it? There have been so much investment and thought and research into mind control, but they've done it. They've actually done it. I know it's in a simulator, but it's a full training simulator that they've done this experiment in, and this lady is quadriplegic, paraplegic,
exactly,
fully handicapped.
quadriplegic.
Like, so it was amazing.
So she has no actual possibility to use her limbs to do to any kind of movement. So she can control and what was it? It was an F-35.
F-35, so an extremely advanced airplane.
This is amazing. Do you remember that movie with Clint Eastwood called Firefox?
Yes. Wow. What an obscure movie.
Yeah, but that's exactly that, thinking in the movie. But again, I don't know if it's going to have any kind of implementation in civil aviation in the future, but I think this is also something pretty. It looks like science. I mean, man, we're living in science fiction nowadays.
So cool.
It's just incredible.
Yeah.
Something that's going to be a very easy one, talking about James Bond, for the next piece of news you want to introduce, because tracking has been something that is present in every single James Bond movie. So I could go on forever about I'm going to just one example. I don't know, the man with the golden gun. The vehicle can be tracked, and that was at the time like, how you're tracking a vehicle. Come on, now we all can be tracked with our phones. So tracking, coming back to a plane that disappears.
Yeah. So last story in this section is about a new and very timely technology that Rockwell Collins is rolling out. That is global airliner tracking. So they've built a system to continuously track global airliners or airliners around the globe. And instead of trying to reinvent the wheel, they've approached it really sensibly. They're taking a whole bunch of different data and layering it on top of each other, and sort of doing some balancing and some kind of weighting towards certain types of data, because some are coming every second, some are coming every 30 minutes, and building up a very accurate picture of where an airplane is at all times in the most reliable way possible. And so they're taking things like, the high frequency data link, performance data from engines, the ACARS, which is the internal reporting and messaging system that it's usually used between the aircraft and the aircraft's dispatch control system. And they did this. They're releasing it in the next 6 months, which is extremely fast considering they only bought this company back in 2013. So hopefully this will help. If anything, God forbid, like the Malaysian airliner thing happens again in the future, that we will have a little bit more of a varied tool set, if you will, to find them quicker.
Wow, it's
very cool. Very cool.
Yeah, can hope that. I mean, that's the other thing with technology. The price falls down, and probably these technologies that used to cost a lot of money, cost less, and at some point we'll find something that's actually worth their while for airlines.
That's what they're saying, is that one of the selling points here is that it's really scalable and it's very cheap because it's built on existing technologies that are already, and this is the key, technology that is already built into airplanes.
Yeah.
So it's not a question like we talked about last week where you have to reverse engineer all of these ancient airplanes. Most of them are already using this stuff anyway. Very smart, very elegant solution.
Yeah, I agree. In 1983, in Octopussy, there was one thing. I mean, it's an okay movie. It's a cool movie, but there's one thing that I really remember as a kid that was really impressive. It was James Bond has a Seiko watch where you can watch TV. There was like a camera on it, and you can actually follow what happened. And so the app of the week this weekend, and we're taking a little bit of leap of faith here because it's not. First of all, it's not an app. Second of all, hasn't been released yet. So a lot of people might complain that we're drinking the Kool-Aid. But we decided to do the app of the week to be the Apple Watch. Yeah. Will you buy an Apple Watch?
It's one of those things where like, I think I'll wait. I think they're cool. And then I'll walk into an Apple store in next month and I'll go, oh, what just happened? I'm wearing an Apple Watch.
So to be fair, there are already a lot of smartwatches. You and me have seen a lot in last week in Barcelona for Mobile World Congress. The reason that Apple might be for us, maybe the app of the week, the gadget of the week or something, is that it's probably going to push the envelope and push a lot of adoption. So we're not saying it's going to be much better, maybe not, we haven't tried it, than current Android-based smartwatches, but I'm pretty sure there's a lot of stuff going to happen. I don't know if you've seen the keynote, but during the keynote there was a lot of displays of demos and stuff that happened, And there are some apps related to travel and airlines that will be released up when the device ships. So the device will ship on April 24th. It will be on display starting April 10th for those who want to go in an Apple store to check it out. So there's American Airlines has developed an app for the Apple Watch, and you'll get a notification when it's time to leave for the airport. You get that real-time info I was talking earlier about, like a gate change, etc. You'll be able to check in with your watch during the flight, and that's actually something that's pretty fun. During the flight, you'll have a map with the remaining time of your flight, and upon arrival, you'll have the details.
That's cool.
The baggage claim, the belt where it is, and the connection details. And I think, most of these stuff can exist already on an iPhone app or an Android an app. I'm not saying, but having a subset of these on your wrist can be pretty cool. Actually.
Absolutely, it's timely at a glance information. You don't have to pull your phone out and get yelled at by the flight attendant. I think it's cool. I think it's great, and I think a lot of airlines and travel brands have seen the potential and have, instead of just building out a bunch of Me Too apps, they've actually built some very cool stuff. Starwood, I don't know if you've seen this.
Yeah.
Starwood allow their app, their Apple Watch app. I keep wanting to say iWatch. I need to work on that. Their Apple Watch app actually works as your hotel room key.
That's awesome.
So just proximity, like you're there and it unlocks. That's cool. That's a very nice, elegant application of the device, as opposed to, I can't think of anything silly, but I'm sure there are going to be a lot of silly apps, and
No, but there's others. City Mapper. You probably use City Mapper.
Great,
it's such a great app for
app.
public transport. Will have directions on your wrist. TripAdvisor will tell you what's best nearby. OpenTable will tell you how to get to your next reservation. These are Uber will have an app with the estimated time of arrival to your car. So again, these are of course only the first steps, and we'll see tons and tons. But I think it's interesting to see the subset that will be created on your wrist. Will we be able to use Passbook? So I've seen, if you look at the keynote, you can see Passbook. I'm wondering if the QR code is big enough, but worse of it, I'm wondering what will be the proper way to turn around your wrist to make it work on the QR code reader.
Yeah, that would be cool, wouldn't it? Because they need to look at the name, don't they? They need to. You can get through certain points, but I think they need to look at the name. But that would be cool. That would be very cool. I'm excited. I'm excited to see how this changes travel.
Yeah, and you'll be in the US. You'll have.
I'm pretty sure I'm gonna come back.
Are you gonna play Oracle Finger and get the gold one? Nah, right?
Yeah, just drop my $10,000 on there.
Yeah,
or whatever it is, something obscene like that.
The topic of the week is a funny one. We're not going to go for too long. It's talking about James Bond and the his relation with aircraft movies, the aircraft in movies, the airplanes and the airports, and etc. So we're just going to do a few minutes about that because there's a lot of stuff. But you see, I'm going to start with one example to see that to show you that the James Bond influence is beyond the movie and beyond even. We're talking 1973. It was, I think. LOT. So the Polish company, the Polish airline that still exists today, which was behind the curtain wall. So behind it was a communist country. They knew about James Bond obviously because when they introduced their first flight, the transatlantic from Warsaw to New York, JFK, it was supposed to be LO-001 and LO-002, the return flight. But because Live and Let Die was playing in the cinema, they called it LO-006 and LO-007. So you see, even back then, even when Europe was divided in two, James Bond had this huge influence. It's pretty cool, actually.
That is cool. Story. That is cool. And there's you found this wonderful list on Wikipedia, which is a list of every James Bond vehicle ever, and it has cars, which is everybody knows about, all of the wonderful Aston Martins, et cetera, and trains. But there is an extremely long list of all of the aircraft that have appeared, who flew them, what they were, and there's some absolute gems in here, like a Boeing 377 Stratocruiser, which is one of the most unique airplanes you'll ever see in your life. The blimp in A View to a Kill.
Yeah.
Right, that View to a Kill? It's just like all over the place. It's such a great list.
Do you have one favorite or?
Airplane that has appeared in James Bond?
Yeah, or
well,
airplane or aircraft or scene or whatever. Because there's for instance, everybody when they talk about the James Bond in the air, they think about you only live twice. Do you remember that little Nelly? It's even on the posters. It's a little helicopter kind of thingy that was very. It's a gyroplane,
yes.
So it's like a mix between a helicopter and a plane, and that's one that everybody talks about. Is it one that you would have loved to fly once? I think it was destroyed on an accident by the guy who was doing. He was both the stuntman on the James Bond movie, but he also did a lot of shows with it, and he destroyed it completely. But is that a plane would you have?
Which movie was it in?
You Only Live Twice is the one that happens in Japan.
Yes, yeah. So those gyroplanes look so much fun. In fact, where I used to live in California, there's the Hiller Aviation Museum, and Hiller was a pioneer in gyroplanes, personal helicopters, VSTOL platforms, and so there's this whole museum full of things like this, and you just look at them and go, God damn, those look fun. But you're right, he crashed it. I mean, the guy he walked away unhurt, but they weren't exactly the safest things in the world.
No, they were absolutely not. And the other, for me as a kid, that I remember, because it was, again, Octopussy 1983, I was old enough to remember, is the opening scene where there was the world's smallest jet aircraft.
Oh, the Acrostar.
The thing that was very small, and the stunt was really impressive because the plane goes within an hangar which doors are being closed. That for me is it still remains to this way. Maybe I was in 83. I must have been 7, 8. It was one of the scenes that really struck Mike, like, wow, holy cow. And apparently it was a very difficult stunt to achieve.
I would imagine, but there's so many great airplanes that they use. They even use Concorde in Moonraker, and then they
he flew the Concorde to
Rio.
Air France, not BA. Air France, because it was going to Rio.
They used a space shuttle. There's the shot of the 747 space shuttle carrier.
I sorry to hold on to interrupt you there, because I was in the US as a kid. My first visit in 1980 in Florida. And I've actually seen that plane landing with a shuttle on the top of it. I would. This is one of my fondest memories. The car stopped on the highway. Everybody was stopping, and my dad was like, "What the hell is going on?" And everybody was watching over, because we were going to Cape Canaveral, so we want to visit, And it was landing with the 747. The space shuttle was landing. I will always remember that. I don't have any pictures because back then they didn't have an iPhone to just grab something, but. That's one of my fondest memories. So sorry, go on.
That's so cool.
The other thing, so he flew. Interestingly enough, we had in terms of civil aviation, we haven't seen a lot of civil aircrafts in the movie. But you would assume that James Bond would fly British Airways.
Well,
right?
That's the funny thing, isn't it? I'm not nearly as up on my Bond trivia as you are, but here's one. You're right. In one of the more recent movies, he flies on Virgin, and Richard Branson has a cameo.
Yeah, that's a Quantum of Solace.
When they aired that on British Airways flights, that whole segment is edited out.
No way! Didn't know that.
Yep.
Oh wow!
I mean, I love British Airways, but that's childish. It's so fun.
So yeah, actually there was a lot of promotion for that 2008 movie. There was even a drink that was invented and served on Virgin Atlantic. So because you can see Daniel Craig being in the upper class. I've never flown Virgin. You did. So, and you can see he's being served that drink. You could actually order that drink. But I really didn't know about that BA story. That's because he flew BA, though. I know he flew a 747 from London to Hong Kong and died another day. And another tidbit of story, he's in first class. Well, obviously, he's James Bond. And he's being served a vodka martini, as usual, again. But behold, the actress displaying the flight attendant is the actual daughter of Roger Moore.
Really?
Yes, in Die Another Day.
That's a nice little... Full circle.
I think he flew for the first time BA in only 1995 when he goes to St. Petersburg.
Seems like a missed opportunity for BA, doesn't it?
Yeah, though there are some signs of. I mean, you probably know that because you're also British. BOAC.
Yes.
Yeah, there are signs of
Better
BOAC.
on a camel, I believe is what it stands for.
I didn't know that. Wow. Oh well, there are signs in the earlier movies. I think in Doctor No, even though Doctor No, the first airline we ever see is Pan Am, which for all of us is one of these legendary airlines. It's disappeared, but the logo and the bags and everything. I mean, well. Anyway, we could go on forever and ever. The one last is cannot not mention Goldfinger because it's almost for everyone their favorites. Where Auric Goldfinger travels from the UK, from London to Geneva. The actual airport you see in the movie, at the beginning, when he starts his journey, is London Southend.
Ah, interesting.
Yeah, which now is an airport. I mean, of course, the definition of being in London is a bit stretched.
Yeah, there's a few of those where it's like they're nowhere near. And actually, I just read an interesting trip report on airliners.net, which I'll post in the show notes, about a guy that took a flight from London Southend to somewhere in Switzerland. I can't remember where, but it looked like a very, very nice little airport.
I've never been there.
Neither have I. I've got no reason to go there, but I think it serves a large part of the UK. So I think I might have to go check it out.
Yeah, I will too as well. Going to the question of the week. So this is a question I invented myself because we were going to James Bond today. In Goldfinger again, when Auric Goldfinger, so this huge, very rich, baddie, James Bond baddie, uses this. He has a private jet. Private jet, I think, is Lockheed, the Jetstar, I think it was. And for the times, it was like, wow, this guy has this private jet. And so I wanted to ask the question: who owns a private 747?
It's a great question, and there's not a straight answer, is there? Because
no, exactly.
There's
so what did you find?
Well, there's a few properly private VIP 747s, and they're owned almost without exception by heads of state or princes. So it kind of already blurs the line between what's private and what's state funded. But there is there are a few. There's the Sultan of Brunei has a 747-400. And again, is that like Air Force One, or is it? I don't know. It's difficult to say.
Well, I mean, if you look at the interior of that plane, because there are some pictures online, I think the retrofit just for the interior was more than north of $100 million, and there's gold, and it's really, you can see that's more for the. Is it the state? Yeah, but it's more like a private jet.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. And I think so. There's is it Prince Al Walid?
Yeah, he's the one who mentioned you found that news that he canceled that A380.
The A380 order, yeah.
Yeah.
But rocked up in his own 400, right?
But he has also his own 400, and I think this with the one of the Sultan Brunei, these are the two most expensive in terms of retrofit. They're also the planes, both of them cost north of 220 million, and these are like just crazy. I mean, in the Al Walid bin Talal is this. Yeah, there's a picture of this 14 dining set table. I mean, it's just insane. No swimming pool then. Didn't you find any other private?
I did. In fact, one of the things that I love, one of my favorite versions of my favorite airplanes, is the 747 SP.
Correct.
Maybe we'll do a segment on that in the next couple of weeks. It's a great airplane for so many reasons, but there were a lot of them that found life after their very limited commercial life as a private jet. And the Las Vegas Sands Group, which own a bunch of casinos in Vegas, use one to ferry in their ultra high rollers from all over the world. You can find it in the Middle East, in Southeast Asia, flying people into Las Vegas to go and spend tons of money. There is a guy that owns an electronics store or chain of electronics stores in the Western United States called Fry's Electronics, which is the most amazing place. He has his own 747 SP. There is
doesn't the NHL has one? I think the NHL has one, right? I'm not sure.
I'm not sure, but there's a 93-year-old Christian evangelist minister called Ernest Angley who also has a Boeing 747 SP, weirdly called
Wow.
the Star 777. Even weirder, it's registered in Aruba, so there's something not right there. I'm not suggesting he is involved in anything. Actually, you know what? There's all kinds of stuff in here about his Wikipedia article that suggests perhaps he is. And then, so there's loads of 747 SPs, which I'm delighted because that means they're still flying. And then another one that I found, because I found it in person, I went 2 years ago to the Boeing factory in Seattle, which if you ever get an opportunity to do, they do the most incredible tour of the production line, which is something to see in itself. And there was a 747-8 coming off the line, almost completely finished in the final stages. And we said, "Oh, who's that one for?" Because that one was for Lufthansa, and that one. And they said, "That one is for a private entity." And she sort of said knowingly, meaning this is the very first 747-800 VIP airplane. And it's owned by Joseph Lau, who is a Hong Kong-based real estate tycoon. And he's also Asia's wealthiest businessman. I thought that was Li Ka-shing, but apparently it's not. And it is the most extraordinary thing I have ever seen in my life. Inside, outside.
Were you able to get inside?
No, it was still
wow.
Like having work done to it. So no, they don't.
Because there are a few pictures online of that one, and it seems much more understated. I mean, still luxurious, but a little bit slightly more understated than the two ones we said earlier about the Sultan of Brunei and Prince Al Walid bin Talal. I think, but having your own 747-8, wow.
So it has in it, this is all conjecture, but apparently it's been validated. It has an Andy Warhol portrait of Mao Zedong, a wine cellar holding more than 10,000 bottles.
Oh my God, wow. I didn't know that.
Yeah. Now, whether
that's
he keeps
good,
these
that's
on the
good
airplane,
enough reason for me
know.
to get in just for the wine bottle.
Yeah. I don't know if he keeps that on his airplane, but this is the kind of guy that we're talking about. I mean, it's a beautiful airplane. It's a very tasteful color scheme.
But if you look at the back orders, there are between 7 and 8 VIP versions of the 747-8.
Yeah.
So I mean, there are rumors, obviously, that apparently the Qatar government, and again, this is where you said earlier, the lines are blurry. Is it a government plane? Is it a private plane? The Qatar government as one, I think it's in order. I think they received it. Kuwait as one in order. But the others, I don't know. I was not able to track them down. I didn't have time unless you didn't want to just spend, because I'm sure if you go to airliners.net or you'll find people that track this. I didn't get there. But there are some. This is one actually a cool market, because when you think that Lufthansa has I think 10 or 12 747-8, and you see that there's already 8 or 9 VIP version. That's pretty cool. Good news for Boeing. The other thing is that obviously you mentioned it yourself in a piece of news a few episodes ago. Air Force One, the new Air Force One will be as well a Dash 8. I'm sure the retrofit there will be also very expensive. And the other, I still wanted to mention, if you ever fly to Heathrow, guys, look at sometimes the window. There will be more often than not 747-400. Which is called Dubai Air Wing, and it's also owned by the government of Dubai. So again, here the lines are blurry. Is it private or not? You can always see parked. So they must be very often in Heathrow. I think they have many. They don't have only one. They have a few. You also have the Oman Royal Flight also has a 747. So you have actually quite a few 747, and this is, for Alex and me, because we love that plane, this is maybe our only option. We have to make friends with those guys if we want to still fly this plane.
Yeah, exactly. Absolutely. We need to go and get buddy with these guys that all have their own 7. Actually, so here you go. Well, we can end on this little piece here. If you want to own your own 747, I found one for sale.
No way!
In 1986, on one of my favorite websites, controller.com, a 1986 747-300 with only 86,000 miles on it, or hours on it, not miles. That would be amazing. 86,000 hours, 16,000 cycles. Got IFE in every seat. It's all economy.
Wow.
Yours for the low price of $5.2 million, which, all things considered, is not bad. It's got 460 seats, gently used.
I'm going to find funding for that in the Silicon Valley or something. I'm just going to become a James Bond baddie and like, take someone ransom just to get that. Wow. Oh, wow. That's... Yeah, let's start a fund. We'll do a Kickstarter campaign. Alex Layovers is buying a 747.
Yeah, that's a great idea. Donate now.
Last bit of the show, Miami. So why Miami? Because we were thinking to do, okay, this is 007 episode. We have to work with something that's related to James Bond. There was Kingston Airport. I think is the first ever, and Dr. knows that's the first ever airport we see, but we don't know anything about Kingston Airport in Jamaica, Alex and I. We already had done London Heathrow as our first episode, and then I thought, you know what? The only actual action scene within a movie that happens in an airport in any James Bond movie is from Casino Royale in 2006, and it's at Miami Airport. Yep. But before we go to Miami, tidbits. Actually, it was not filmed in Miami.
Yeah.
If you look at some point, you'll see a plane which has the name CSA, which is basically the Czech company. So the filming, the runway filming, was done in Prague, in the Václav Havel Airport. The airfield action. So you see a plane that is completely, there's a fake name. I think what's the name? Skyfleet. That's the name of. It looks like a 747. It's actually a 747-200. That piece of action was filmed in Surrey, in the UK, on an aerodrome, and the rest was actually filmed at Pinewood, which is a very famous studio. So almost nothing was filmed in Miami. The really thing that's really fun is that the team had to convert the airport in Prague International Airport, to look like exactly an airport in Miami. So you figured like you have to plant palm trees and they had to change signs and stuff like that. This is amazing, right? And it's and the interiors. Yeah, I want to finish that. The interiors of the airport, which supposedly is Miami, it was partially also done in Nassau, in the Bahamas, in the airport. So anyway, nothing is Miami. The reason why, maybe, is because, and I'm sorry for those of you who like that airport, it's a very so-so airport, Miami Airport, isn't it?
Yeah, I'm not a huge fan of Miami Airport. It's the only good thing about it is that you do get a very diverse collection of airplanes and airlines going in there, especially in the cargo areas. You get planes that are older than you and I combined coming in there, doing all kinds of crazy stuff. So there's... From a pure aviation geek, if you can get out to a point where you can see the ramp, there's some good stuff coming in there. As a passenger, not a fan of Miami Airport. Not a fan.
No, there's two reasons. I mean, first of all, if you go to Miami, I've been to Miami several times. It's true, it's not the layout. It's one of those airports when you see that they've been building after building after building, and it doesn't really make a lot of sense in itself, right? It's
just like Heathrow.
Yeah, correct. Though Heathrow, since the inception of Terminal 5 and now Terminal 2, starts to make a little bit more sense. I mean, it's the layout, if you just look on a map, the layout of Miami International Airport is a bit bizarre. There's concourse D to J, but there's no concourse A, B, and C because of, which is okay. An airport lives and, changes. So they had to build above other concourses. So it all makes it's not very sense. It doesn't make a lot of sense. But the other reason why you go to Miami, it's because it's one of the main hubs to go to Latin America.
Yeah.
You will transit there, and it's I think it's one of the biggest hub in terms of cargo for Latin America. Actually, Miami Airport, and I'm sure it is. Interestingly, the busiest route from Miami Airport is to London. If you combine American Airlines, British Airways, and Virgin Atlantic, it's their busiest route. Didn't know that.
That's interesting. Wow.
Yeah. I wouldn't have thought that.
I wouldn't have known that either.
And the last thing I want to mention is, though this airport is a bit not very overwhelming, it's not an airport that you can be a fan of. I mean, guys, if you do not agree with us, please let us know in the comments because maybe we missed something. But I'll say something. They have actually now implemented an entire iBeacon program in it. It's one of the first airports that has a wide. All the I think most, if not all, the concourses, all the terminals have iBeacons. So, and they provide that as a platform if you want for anyone. Of course, we're talking here app developers. It could be the airlines, could be the airport itself, to say, okay, look, you can make use of these little beacons to actually tell in. The way it works, and you and me have seen that a little bit probably in Mobile World Congress and other conferences, is that they can tell you, push you a notification very locally in a very specific point geolocation, geofencing. So, I mean, they're doing that. I mean, we haven't seen any of this in most airports. So that's it helps. Offering that as a platform, I think it's pretty innovative and it's pretty good. So I mean, I would give them good grades for that.
Yeah, I think, and they have free Wi-Fi.
Oh,
which is
I
good.
didn't know that.
Free airport. Yeah. So that's not too bad. But it is, it's not a relaxing airport. I'll just say
it's stressful. I agree, and it's not very beautiful as well in terms of design either.
No.
I mean, let's be honest here, none of the American airports. I mean, rare are the American airports that really are. Give you a good impression in terms of design. They're usually boxes, right?
Agreed.
Yeah. So which is maybe we'll go there in one episode. Which is maybe also the way flying is seen in the U.S. is more like taking the bus, whereas in other countries it's still this glamorous experience. So if you take the bus, you don't expect to have a 5-star hotel, right? So
no, your expectations are set pretty low.
Anyway, anything else you wanted to say about Miami?
No, I think honestly the best way to get out of that airport is to rent a car. The public transport infrastructure isn't great, and that's probably my best tip. Or taxi.
Yeah, I would always take a cab. I don't think I've ever done anything else with taking the cab. Then again, that's the case for like 100% of the American airports I've been to. I always take a cab.
True, very true.
Anyway, on that, thank you so much. Again, we went over time again, but this was a 007 episode. We just had to do that.
Loads of trivia. Cannot do this episode without some awesome trivia.
Yeah. So that's the only one. That was our only shot. We hope you guys liked it. Tell us in the comments. Layovers.2. You'll find all the information there. And you know what they say. James Bond will return. So layovers will return. See you next week. Bye, Alex. Bye, guys.
On behalf of Layovers, the entire crew would like to thank you for joining us on this podcast, and we're looking forward to seeing you on board again next week. Flight attendants, please prepare for landing.